like to live chat with you today. So I'm going to see if it is showing up on my YouTube like I'm hoping. I think there is a section for live chats. Wonderful. Okay, so this is where you can find me on YouTube. You might have to click to the live section, but my guess is that if you are hearing this, you've already done that. When it's done, it will go to where it belongs. So I'm Christy Friesen, as you know. Welcome to Christy Universe, and we're going to do a little live chat today about creativity and when it goes wrong. So there should be a place where you guys can say hello, you can chat, and you can ask questions. I see Pam has just jumped on. Hi, Pam. Aloha. And I am going to do my best to answer those questions and discuss the topic and just holler with things you might need. So I'm seeing Cindy's here and Siobhan's here, Janet's here. Thank you guys for popping on. I really appreciate it. I will be, hi Katie, hi Janet. It's so good to see you guys. I will be doing more of these live chats here on Facebook in the coming year. I'm going to be revamping some of the ways I interact with you guys, but it's really great. Hi Darlene, you're here on time. Yes, Bonnie's here, Kim is here, Janet's here. So many of you guys are popping on. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. This will be a good time to let you know that as we go along, if you want to give a thumbs up or subscribe, of course do that, because then you'll get notifications when you're in YouTube that I'm doing something or there's something new, so that's good. L. Eddie says, I never look at my creativity as a failure. I look at it as a way not to do it the next time around. That is exactly what we're going to be talking about. So you get the gist of what is happening. So I am very glad to hear that many of you already do that. Thank you for weighing in on that, because it's so true. Deborah says, found you. Cindy says, I like the YouTube live. Me too. Nuts Crazy World says, hey, hi Christy and everyone from Maryland. Hello, my friend. Good to see you. I'm looking back and forth because some things show up on my phone, some things show up on my computer, and so that's kind of how I can keep track. Katie said, I just shared to your Facebook groups. Katie, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I kind of need, like, you know, the editors behind me or the production people that can be putting it to where it belongs and making sure everything is good or telling me if there's questions and stuff. But I really appreciate you doing that. Okay, so we're going to jump right into this topic. And the reason why I want to talk about that, and L. Eddie says, I just wanted to say good morning to you, all you artists and creativity friends. Thank you for your time. Well, thank you for that. It's really nice to be here with you. I appreciate that. And welcome to everybody else. One thing that I like about the chats that I do, usually on Facebook, but here on YouTube as well, is that because so many of the people watching know each other during these live chats, sometimes little side conversations happen when somebody is thinking about part of something I've discussed and then they have things to say amongst each other. I always think that's lovely, and it is part of the dynamic of getting together live, is that you can have these conversations. If anyone finds them distracting, just ignore that part and look at me and listen. But if you are finding that you're having little side conversations, I'm good with it. I think that's fab. So let's talk about that. Creative failure. What does that mean? The reason I wanted to talk about this is I was scrolling, as we do. You know, you're flipping through reels or whatever, shorts. And somebody said, and I've heard this before, so it's not news to any of us, that it is sometimes difficult emotionally as fallout from our Instagram world and YouTube world, because we are surrounded with things that worked out. Beautiful meals, happy smiling children. Obviously there's fails all the time, but especially as creatives, it's like, look at this great thing that I did that turned out amazing. And how many of us have really seen somebody post going, well, this one really sucked? Occasionally, yes, but that's not a normal part of the social experience, which is fine. We don't want to see everybody's bruises, cuts, and broken pieces of creativity as a general thing. So when people put things up that are, hi Suzanne, hi Cindy, that are finished and beautiful, that's like going to a museum. You're seeing the finished painting. Now, as you know from paintings, people who curate great works of art will often see that behind the finished painting there are multiple, one or more, sketches, things that didn't quite work out that were painted over. And a lot of times we want to see what those look like too, because I'm interested in what a creative considers a failure. Because a lot of times we would look at it and go, oh, that failure is like better than my best things, which is sometimes the case. But we each have those moments where we go, yeah, no, that did not work out well. And it is interesting that we do not have a lot of that to help ground us in our own feelings of self-worth. So I thought, let's talk about it today. And I'm going to show you some of my fails just to share with you that, it may look like I got my act together, but just like everybody else, there are many times when, nope, I do not. So Katie said, I need lots of inspiration. Not Katie. Oh my gosh, I just suddenly vanished from your first name. Fen needs lots of inspiration. And let's see, Siobhan says, I finished beautiful things and didn't show how many swear words you used to make it. We should probably have a counter of how many attempts, swears, and frustrations and quarts of ice cream you've eaten before you got to this finished. Kathy, that's right. Thank you, Kathy. Suddenly, brain fart. Before you got to the finished thing. So I'm going to show you a couple of fails of mine, and then we're going to talk about how we should feel emotionally, which I think most of us kind of know, but it's good to have that remembrance. And then I'm going to talk about some, sometimes when you just like that, nope, no. And other times you're like, okay, what can I do to resolve this or to actually use it? So first thing I'm going to show you is, and they're in no particular order. Actually, the first thing I'm going to remind you is I did some imagery out in Facebook with a picture of a very failed necklace that my family fondly refers to as the Christmas worm. And if you had looked at my Facebook page or I got my newsletter, which by the way, if you don't already subscribe to my free e-blather, please do. Just go to my page, christyfriesen.com, and you'll see a subscribe. Click on that because I have ever so clever and delightful newsletters that are short and sweet with lots of pictures, and that will keep you up to date on all this kind of stuff. But I had a picture that has a picture of this Christmas worm, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Now, I do see that our Mutts Nuts Crazy World says, I have a bucket of fails that I call the bucket of shame. I call mine the fuck it bucket, but I like both of those because sometimes you're just like, oh. But the interesting thing that you mentioned is that we don't necessarily throw those pieces away. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more and why that's a good idea to do. So thumbs up, girl. Darlene says, I have a swear jar to buy more polymer clay. It's a bucket of experience. Yeah, exactly. Nice one, Janet. So I'm going to show you a couple of fails. That fail is, oh wait, I'm going to do the Christmas worm first and then I'll show you some more. So the Christmas worm came about. There was a magazine in the day called Bead Unique and then Bead Design Studio, and it ran for about 10 years. And I was in every single issue, and it only came out quarterly. But I didn't realize until after it had stopped being produced that I had been in every single issue. And I knew the editor, we got along really great. And what we would do is we would meet up at one of the shows like Tucson or Bead and Button, and we'd kind of go through the projects I wanted to do for the year. And like I said, there was only 4 or sometimes 6 a year. I forget, it might have switched to bi-monthly. But so we'd kind of discuss and, on paper, all these things look great. Well, as you creative types know, that sometimes deadlines sneak up on you. So although I may have known that I had this thing coming up for months in advance, it was often right up to the actual drop dead deadline that I was actually getting the information over to the magazine people. So for most of the time, the articles were good. The projects turned out well. It was nice. There was 1 or 2 that were a little like, but they were still okay. But the Christmas worm, so this one went out in the December holiday issue. The idea was great. It was juxtaposition. So I was combining polymer and metal, faceted with round, black with pink, fiber with, shiny. So the idea was great, but the reality of it was pretty darn bad. And it was one of those things where I had pushed it right up to the wire. I had no time to redo it. And I sent it in, and it actually did get published. And my editor very kindly like, no, I liked it. But it's like, no, no, it is really bad. So I made this sort of loopy-whirly thing that was supposed to be a pink organic contrast to the black faceted beads, but ended up looking like a worm that had been tied up for some reason in some sort of strange torture device. It's pretty bad. So my family, who helped me at the time, various family members that were helping with, other different thing, doing the newsletter with me, doing answering things and whatever. They like me, thought it was just terrible and giggling. And obviously I I did an awful lot of stuff that were good, so I can handle one thing that's not. So they referred to it as the Christmas worm, and it ever has been thus. But I feel like it was one of those epic fails in I should have just like somehow stayed up all night and done another or revised it or something, because it really was not exciting. But it was nice because the reason why is it just makes you go, all right, we don't always hit it out of the park. And how much do we need that outside validation of our self-worth, that we feel like we have to put everything out there that's awesome, instead of being able to laugh at ourselves when sometimes things just mess up? So I hope that is one of the takeaways that we can all take away with that, is like, keep trying to remind yourself that you are good enough for you. You like what you're doing. You feel you're good. Obviously, there's always room for improvement. You don't need other people to tell you that you are. It is great when other people tell you that you are. It's like having candy. I love it. Please bring on more candy. But that doesn't mean that you have the ability to go in and get yourself a nice, nutritious meal all by yourself. You don't have to have someone providing you with all that candy all the time. And when it does come, just enjoy it. But again, remember what it is. It's the little sprinkling on the top of your self-worth, not the core of it. So anyway, that's one thing to take away from that. Dick and Irene, hi Irene, said, I learn what not to do when something doesn't turn out. So then you end up doing things differently, which is so true. And I know Irene and I have had this discussion, is that for some people, the act of the creative part of it all is enough. It's very satisfying. But for others, that's nice, but I want that finished thing at the end to turn out good. I'm deriving a lot of self-satisfaction by having something turn out good. So when it doesn't turn out good, there's that sense of like, oh man, I wasted my time. And I get that. That is legit, man. I have that too. And so we do want to make sure that we are not doing a continuous series of things that are failing over and over again. At some point, you got to examine and go, what the heck am I doing? Maybe I need a different material. Maybe I need new glasses. Maybe whatever it may be, to kind of make life a little bit easier. So now I'm going to show you. Yeah, Irene says I'm result oriented, and that's sort of one of the things we talked about. I think that's a great thing as an artist, to be result oriented. But many people find just the creative part great, and then they can kind of let go of whatever the end product was because they had fun making. And I think if we can balance those two things out, that's good. All right, let me show you a couple more fails, and then we'll talk about what to do with them. So I think psychologically we know, as we've talked about, that don't put so much pressure on yourself. Who you got to impress anyway, right? It's enough. It's enough that you are creative, that you're always getting better, and that when people enjoy it, they enjoy it. You try and find the people you can show it to that are the most supportive. You try to go to whatever events, if you sell or whatever, that are going to give you the most amount of emotional success. If you are doing it because you need the financial success, then make sure that's in a separate category from your self-worth. All those things, you've heard it, you've seen the memes. So that's one thing I want to remember. Eddie was saying Thomas Edison was confronted by the press when he told him, we heard you failed 10,000 times to create a light bulb. And he says, well, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 things that didn't work. That is a great quote that I've heard attributed to Edison. And it really kind of emphasizes what we're talking about here, is that if you can look at things that fail as lessons and steps along the path, then you're going to be a lot more healthy. That having been said, it's okay to cry when something screws up. Release that frustration. Have some ice cream. Throw it at the wall maybe. No, okay, don't do that. Most of the time, I find if something fails, or I feel like it's failing, I have to force myself to put it out of my sight and go do something else, which is super hard because I want it to be good. I want it to be done. I want to pick at it until it's finished. But that almost always ends badly. So if something is just like, I don't know what's going on here, put it away and let enough time pass so that you can look at it objectively, what's good, what's bad, and take your next steps. Because when you're in the heat of that moment and you need it to turn out, you're going to make some bad choices that you might not when you come back to it with fresh eyes. Okay, so now let's look at a few fails of mine. All right, so this one, you can tell right away where the failure part was. The stems of this tree. So I kept this one because I liked how this part turned out, the little swirly pattern, and all of these Swarovskis and pearls I didn't quite want to get rid of, and they're looking okay. But when I made this thing, I put it around a glass vessel so it's hollow, and the tree limbs were just like, what is happening here? This is dumb. But I thought, okay, I'm going to hang on to this because it's baked, and I can add additional polymer clay, armatures. I could put epoxy clay. There's so many things I could do. I have had this weird thing for at least 5 years, maybe more, because probably about 5, because when I made it for a specific thing and it just was, excuse me, not correct, I let it go. I didn't chop all the things off first. I just let it go out of sight. And then later on I came back and looked at it and went, okay, the problem are these branches. I'm going to cut those off. That way when I look at it again, that is out of mind, out of memory, and I can look at it fresh. So at some point, there's some holes where the original armature wires were. I will probably be able to shove new wires down in there, use some epoxy clay or liquid clay or whatever to kind of create on top of this and see what happens. But we'll see. Who knows? It may turn into something completely different. So that's sort of little trick number 1. Is that if something goes wrong, put it out of the sight till you come back to it, and then don't be afraid to chop stuff off. With polymer clay, it's a little easier. Some other materials like epoxy clay and some of those other ones are a little harder to actually chop things off of, but it can be done. So you're going to want to just go ahead and get rid of the things that are problematic. Then when you look at it again, the fail part is gone and you can see it as potential, which is great. So that's the first one I wanted to show you. Second one were these couple of pieces here. I made this orchid, and by themselves these are okay. But my concept was I was making this orchid that went inside a mosaic, and I did all of this stuff on there, and then I looked at this orchid and I went, this just looks like some sort of fuzzy, weird, like crazy scratchy tongue situation. Like on paper it sort of looked like it could be good, but the reality of it, it was just garbage. But this is by itself kind of interesting. I mean, maybe it'll become a back piece for some headdress or part of a robe or some little weird cactus strangeness. I don't know what these will be. I ripped them off the original problem area long ago, and then I redid the section that it was in with something different. You can use a Dremel if it's epoxy clay, says Cladybug. Thank you. You are absolutely right about that. The Dremel is a good way. Make sure you're wearing your protection so you're not getting that dust. Same thing with polymer. You don't want to breathe dusts of anything. Hi, Pixie. No problem. We're just waxing eloquent about things. So it's no worries. Come on in. I'm a beater, says Cindy, and I toss rejects into a box later. I look at them and I'm often inspired by the colorways, and they remind me of something to do or not do. I think if you get into epoxy clay, if you're a beader, you get into epoxy clay, those partial bead creations can then insert themselves into a mosaic with epoxy clay. And I have a lot to say about epoxy clays and assembling various pieces into mosaic assemblages. So you can check this YouTube channel once we're done chatting and find a lot of things about that. So that's really good. And Cladybug is Patty, and she's giving a shout out to Pixie. So glad pals are here, which is really great. All right, so this one is another fail. All right, I want you guys to see this. So this one, I thought at the time, I was like pretty excited about the direction it was going. Very Gustav Klimt kind of feeling. But there's a couple of pretty bad things about this. First of all, she does not have enough body. Now, I didn't try to make this part anatomically correct because nobody has that skinny of hips and legs. But she just needs a lot more length to her to offset the rest. So that's easy to do. I can add additional clays down there, no problem there. But I want you to take a look at this really bad face. So she had some kind of Owen Wilson thing going on with her nose, and it just got all out of control. Like the profile is not too bad. You know, it looks like, okay, I got the profile pretty good, you know. But that nose has got a weird gargle in it, and the eyeballs, oh dear. Those eyeballs just, no. They're popping out when they shouldn't be. And I tried to do like a paint thing and it just all blew out. So I love all of this. What am I going to do with this thing? Well, I'm going to figure out a way to surgically remove the face and put on another face. Now that's not going to be easy. And before I do it, I am going to fully accept that Siobhan Frankel. Yep. I'm going to accept that I may wreck it a lot more than I anticipate, and I'm okay with it, because you kind of have to get in the right frame of mind. Sometimes trying to salvage something could mean what I end up with is a bunch of little pieces that I can use in a mosaic later. And I'm going to be okay with that. All right. Cindy says, yeah, I'm working with epoxy. I'm still learning that. I find I don't have the big vision. Well, that comes with practice. So no worries there. It definitely comes. A veil, says Bonnie. I know, but the problem is the eyes will still be visible. So there's a number of things that I could do. I mean, I could build forward and she could have a raven's face. That would cover that all up. I might cut it out and put another face in there. Who knows? I haven't fully decided, but there's a lot of elements that are working in this. Just that face is frightening. I just don't want to look at that ever again. And not frightening in a good way, because sometimes good frightening is great. But some of the other elements are nice. So we'll see where she goes from this. But this was a thing just to remind you that when I made it, I was excited. I thought I was impressive. And then I looked at it and went, nope, not as impressive as I thought. It has pretty elements in it. Thank you, Cindy. But, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. But the nice thing about that is if you can really remember that the creative process is very organic, and it is, by that I mean it is going to grow in places that you didn't expect. For example, I love orchids. I'm right now, as I'm looking at my camera, in front of me, I live in Maui, so in front of me when I have my windows open, I can see plumeria trees in bloom, which is great, and beyond that, the Haleakala mountain range, which is an amazing thing to look at, and my shelf in front of that is full of orchids. So I feel very inspired when I just sit down to make things. But one of these little orchid plants, so after they bloom, I usually do some tricks so that they'll bloom again in a few months, within 3 to 6 months. But this one thing decided to throw out a keiki, which is a little baby plant. So it throws out as if it's going to make a flower, but then it makes another plant. Well, I'm like, well, that's cool. I had to look that up. And then from that same area, it shot out a flower stem. So it was feeling really, super productive. But this flower stem now has been actively becoming bigger and bigger for about 8 months. So it's got tiny little buds in the top, but it just gets, if I let it go straight up, it would be touching the ceiling by now. I don't know what it thinks it's doing. So I kind of kept moving it in the sun. So it's spiraling, aiming towards the sun. It's spiraling around in this weird orchid tornado. That's what I mean by organic. I was not expecting any of this to happen. And I'm invested in the process to see what it's going to do next. I can't remember what color the flower is. I'm pretty sure I know what kind it is, but it's just like, who even knows now what's going to happen? So if you can approach your art sort of like that, is just like sometimes it does these weird things. So instead of trying to force it back to do the thing you thought it was supposed to do, keep watching what it is doing and adjust accordingly. So when you're making something, like I said, okay, this one I thought I was having this Gustav Klimt type lady that was just wistfully thinking about life, and in the end she may end up being a raven-headed weirdo, and that would not have been something that I expected. So, and by raven-faced I mean not headed, but who knew? That's good. She could be a Klimt mermaid. Oh yeah, Siobhan, she could end up with mertail and go in that direction. What else have we got? I like the idea of the raven face. That might be really fun, right? You can have a mer raven, can't you? Yes, Conyers raven face would be cool, right? What if she wore a mask that covers it? Exactly. She could have a golden mask. So there's so many ideas, and I'm kind of excited now. And again, I put that out of view for a couple of years. I pulled it back out, and I can look at it without any of the emotional association of failure, and I can see it just as possibility, with the expectation that if I blow it, and she just crumbles into bits and pieces, then they'll find their way into a mosaic or something later on, so it's no problem. Another reason why you might want to get into mosaics, kids, because every one of your failures, every dropped and shattered glass or plate, all just becomes fodder for your next brilliance, which I like. I like the idea that you can cobble together all the broken pieces and create something new. There's a metaphor in there, I feel. So that's kind of exciting for me. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep you guys posted. All right, so now let's talk about, so we've got something that's problematic. We've maybe cried about it, or we put it out of sight and brought it back again. We're ready to do something new. What are some of the things we can do? And we've already kind of touched on a few of those. One of them, of course, is chopping it up and using it in something else, or cutting bad pieces off and putting something else. Failure fodder, right? That's a good one. We should write that down and keep that one, failure fodder. Maybe that's the name of our fuck it bucket / bucket of shame. It could be just a failure, or failures fodder for fun, fantastic future. Something. Anyway. Okay, so we can chop it up, use it in other things, cut off the offending parts, add to it, re-envision it. All of those things are things we can do. The other thing that we can do is we can use paints or coatings to change the entire look of it. So I'm going to show you a couple of things. I have made a line called Swelligent. Many of you guys know about it. I have a very old and rather long video here on my YouTubes showing you how to use Swelligent, which is a series of metal coatings, patinas, and dyes. I'm not going to get into all that now. I will be in the new year making several short, easy videos to walk you through the process. It's in the process. I have some on stock in my site, so you can go there and buy some. It's in the process of having a new manufacturer distributor. We're working on that, so by the beginning of the new year, I should have some the new revised versions to show you. We're not changing anything. We're just getting rid of some and focusing on different sets and whatever. Pixie says, drop it out the window. This is very true. I have done that with plates and things before. Put it in a little bag, drop it out the balcony, instant shards. Sometimes that's very good because, again, we're letting nature decide how it gets broken up and then going from there. So that's good. But Swelligent is neat because it is a powdered metal suspended in a clear acrylic base. So it's like an acrylic paint, but made out of metal. And then you can add patinas to it as if it was metal, because it is, and change how everything looks. For example, I made this little moth out of polymer clay, and then I coated it with kind of a coppery. It still needs a little bit more refining to play with it, but covered it with a copper and some coloring. This one is a polymer clay bit of a mold that I've added the iron and the rust to. This was a bumblebee, and the bumblebee was okay, but what if it had burnt? What if I had the colors wrong and I wanted to turn it into a bronze plaque? Now, all of these have only had one coating of the metal. They are ready for another shinier coat to go on top to maybe pop that even more and make it more drama. Here's another iron rusted one, which I think is kind of fun. So you can see what I'm getting at here is I'm taking little pieces. I'm trying to see in my little bucket here if there's anything else to show you. Here's another, that same one. This one's with the silvery coating on there. That same design. So you can take something like acrylic paint, or in this case, the Swelligent coating, and you can completely cover something where you picked the wrong colors, or it got burnt or discolored when you were baking it, or in the case of epoxy clay, where you wanted to sculpt it out of a hard material, but you really wanted it to be copper or brass or bronze or silver or iron, and then you coat it from there. But it's a great way to handle color failures and oven baking failures. So if you're working with polymer clay and your colors turned out weird, or your oven did weirdness to you, think about something like Swelligent to turn it into a metal. Or you can even use like acrylic paint and things like that. It doesn't work as well for jewelry because it's a top coating. It doesn't permeate the polymer clay or the epoxy clay. It stays on top, which means if you're going to wear it, it's going to get bonked around and get scratched and that sort of thing. So, but for anything sculptural, it is amazing. Cindy said, my mother gave me a raccoon bird figure that was never perched right and the eyes were creepy. So I listened to Christy, I put it in a bag and went outside with a hammer and smashed it. Very satisfying. And then you can use those pieces in something else and you still have the memory of the gift. You just don't have to deal with the weird creepiness. Oh, and toss the creepy eyes. Sometimes eyes are creepy, as we well know. These are some dang creepy eyes. I'm sorry, but they gotta go. So yeah, eyes, if you don't get them right, yeah, not good. All right, so that is like the essence of how to like coat it over and fix it. You can also cover it over like with washi papers and I use often with polymer clays, I use a liquid clay to put it it's a super saturated clay, and then I rebake it so I can soak the cloth or the washi paper in the liquid clays and add it on top of the form. So that's another way to cover something over. You can use Mod Podge or something like that with things like epoxy clays and such if you want to. I think the Mod Podge over time maybe doesn't it isn't as good as probably the liquid clays that can then be baked, but you could also use a varnish to do that. You can paper mache over it. There's a lot of things that you could do to cover it over, but I love the idea of a washi paper going on the surface of something. So that's kind of fun. Another, if you work with resins, and resins have their own do's and don'ts, but if you're working with a two-part resin, you may take some piece, turn it into an ancient looking thing, and then drop it into a resin scene. So now you have this underwater ancient looking artifact. So there's a lot of things that you can do to re-envision a fail into something else. So, all right, so let's see. Cindy says, I do have the pieces, but I didn't tell my mom. Your secret's safe with us. We won't. Mod Podge gets sticky. Yeah, Irene, I think so. I think I've heard that it's a good idea for like some short-term projects, but as an artistic medium, there are other better things to use. Okay, so if anybody has any questions that I can answer super quickly, I'm happy to do that. But what I wanted to just do is share with you the idea that failures happen. We should not be ashamed to own them and know that it's part of the process. From time to time, if you post a lot so people can get to know you as an artist, it never hurts to post to fail, because then people can kind of identify with you a little bit more. There is a bonding thing about being a little vulnerable. You don't want to go to the extreme of being super needy all the time, because that has its own problems. You do that with your closer friends. Can we see the Christmas worm? I would show it to you, but it is long since gone. It was years ago that it was part of the magazine article, and I'm sure it got dismantled thereafter once the realization of its full failure sunk in, but I don't have it anymore. However, Cindy and Suzanne, you can go, and I will, once this is all done, I don't know that I can add anything onto the live, now that I think about it. But if you go to my Facebook groups, and you can get to them by just going to ChristyFriesen.com, and you'll see a Where's Christy, and you'll be able to go to the different groups that I'm in. I put some posts up with that, so you can see the Christmas worm, and you can see just how bad it is. So if I make a YouTube video about this topic, I will put it up again. So maybe I'll do a little short reel or something with some fails. But yeah, so message me. I'll make sure I can send that to you. But it is always nice to remember that we all mess up. Even your most favorite artist in the universe made flaws, did stupid things, had a complete dumb idea that maybe they stuck with far longer than they should have, and should have cut and run earlier on because it was not working. But that's okay. It's part of the process. Don't worry about it. Be enough for yourself. Get your validation from your friends about who you are as a person, and don't worry about each individual thing making or breaking your emotional well-being as best you can. And when that doesn't work, there's always chocolate ice cream. All right, guys. Happy creating. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I really appreciate it. Share it to any of your creative friends that you feel like might want to see this. So now I'm going to figure out how to end this, because that's not always easy. And I will say goodbye. So let's see if I know how. Sometimes that's a weird one. But goodbye until we meet again. Goodbye.